And how does it feel being a CEO?
I don't do any work.
And while you are finding an investor for your company, so what things did you do in order to make them happy and invest?
Right? Just because you have money to invest doesn't make you the right investor.
Do you think that there is any danger in the future of these people working in the US healthcare domain?
So short term, there's likely going to be dislocation here and there depending on what work you do.
As a person who is not outside the American, I would say, continent, and who does not work on the healthcare sector, just a normal being. So, do you think that for that person, they should know about the American healthcare, anything related to that?
So it depends on what the person's passion is, but the healthcare system is a very complicated system. We probably spend more on healthcare in the United States than most countries' GDP
Yep.
on everything. Right, U.S. healthcare expenditure was $5 trillion last year, and its inflation rate is well above the CPI. Historically, always has been, maybe for 1 or 2 years when CPI was abnormally high in the
Yeah.
US, but is 5%, 7%. And so $5 trillion is probably larger than probably the top four, except for the top four economies in the world.
Yeah.
We spend more on healthcare than any other nation, certainly. And the challenge we have is that what do we get for it? If you think about outcomes, basic metrics, immunization rates, mortality rates, infant mortality rates, obesity rates, we are average, if not really bad, in a lot of these metrics. Compared to the other countries that don't spend anywhere near what we do, either on a total GDP basis or even on a per capita basis. So when you think about that problem, for anyone who is not in the U.S. And is thinking about big areas to make impact, certainly this U.S. healthcare sector, from a problem perspective and an opportunity perspective, is real. Coupled with the fact that a lot of the solutions, while maybe specific to the U.S. because of the vagaries of the U.S. system is, for the most part, can be generalized elsewhere in other parts of the world as well. So that you're not only helping a system that's far away from you, but sitting in Nepal, the issues that face citizens that live in the Middle East, citizens that live in Africa, citizens that live in Asia, including Nepal, a lot of these same problems over time are going to occur. So getting ahead of that with these solutions is also meaningfully impactful. So lots of reasons why this is an important sector, not just for U.S. centric, but for the global, from a global landscape.
And many people have built their entire career just on the American healthcare. I'm not talking about America. Here in Nepal also, in India, there are many people, and there are many countries, especially if we see, I guess, Southeast Asia, there are also many people there who have built their career on the American healthcare domain. So, looking the present context, since many things have been disclosed from the administration, do you think that there is any danger in the future of these people working in the US healthcare domain?
Well, so yes and no, right? There's always short-term disruption. I mean, I think this administration has, made more changes in the last 45 days in office than
Yeah.
probably any peacetime president. Certainly, wartime obviously is a different story. Although one could argue even in wartime. So short term, there's likely going to be dislocation here and there depending on what work you do. So, for example, if you are involved in anything related to U.S. foreign aid and USAID for direct dollars that are coming to you from an NGO perspective, jury's out. Supreme Court ruled that the Doge, the Department of Government Efficiencies interventions there were unconstitutional. Who knows? Or illegal? Who knows? I mean, that'll all play itself out. So in some regards, short term, there's always going to be risk. But the U.S. political system is a pendulum. It swings, and in the macro sands of time, relatively stable. And so for the long term, I don't think that the bets that anyone's making would be the wrong bets, right? They may shift and they may take ups and downs, just like everything does in any economy. But for the long term, the structural issues of U.S. healthcare are there. They're going to persist. If anything, they're going to get worse if we don't focus on it from a policy perspective. And this administration seems to not want to focus on some of the fundamental issues. So I think that long term, it's still a good bet to make for sure.
And don't you think right now that for businesses like yours who are dependent on other countries, it's a quite risky time?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think we don't import goods, right? We're not
Yep.
an importer of finished product or raw material where a lot of the economic policies pertaining to tariffs seem to be at play. I mean, we don't really import anything, right? What we do is we build capabilities and services, and we leverage those services from our partners in the context of Nepal through TechCraft, and our relationship with TechCraft, and in the context of India through DCT. And so, from that standpoint, it's not clear that the administration's rules are going to make any impact directly in the short term. In the long term, yes, I think anything overseas is at risk. And we're actually actively having conversations with our partners at TechCraft and DCT to say, how do we make sure that we're thoughtful in protecting Abacus Insights' best interests as we serve our customers, so that we don't run afoul of any, not just legal issues and concerns, but even the perception can be a challenge, right? So
Yeah, but we have been hearing constant messages from the Trump administration that data, they do not want the American data to go outside from their country.
yep,
So for that data, they could take some very bold steps. That could
they
be,
could. They could, but remember, we already operate in that environment today. We have customers already that tell us
yep.
that their data cannot be seen or accessed overseas. For what it's worth, for all of our customers, even those that do allow for access, data doesn't leave the perimeter of U.S. East and U.S. West in the context of the AWS and whatever the parameters are in Azure, right? So from that standpoint, we already are compliant. Yeah. So as it pertains to U.S. healthcare data, there's always concern, and our existing customers have already got restrictions because of their underlying regulatory issues. So we are very cognizant of these rules and regulations and already comply with them. None of our data for any of our customers, even those that allow for access to be overseas, the data still sits within the environments that are domestic, right? So from that standpoint, if there is a radical change in policy at the federal level, then certainly, there would be some impact. But broadly speaking, a lot of what we do overseas in Nepal and in India, doesn't directly touch data all the time, right? So modifications, yes, but wholesale shift in our business strategy, probably not.
Like you discussed about your customers and their policy. Like, why do payer companies need institutes like Abacus Insights to work? I mean, they have a hell lot of money to build the services that you are giving on their own side. Like, they can also do that. So why are they trusting on companies like you?
Yeah, it comes down to, well, first of all, I challenge you that they have a lot of money. The U.S. healthcare system's under a lot of pressure. Payers last several years, there've been ups and downs in the underwriting cycle. So, and
Yep.
most payers operate, the publicly traded ones notwithstanding, on a 1% to 2% operating margin. So very, very tightly run businesses, right? And so I would argue that they don't have a lot of money. Their capital is scarce. The real question when it comes to, and I used to run an insurance company in the United States, and the question always comes up: what's your core business? Right? What is the stuff that's going to make you different in the market, and what are the kinds of things that you should be working with partners on that's not core to you? And I would argue that the health insurance industry is in the business of selling health insurance and creating products and services that give access and financing and stability to a member, right? That technology is not a core competency of most health insurance companies. And so therefore, when you think about, they're already buying claims processing systems from third-party vendors. They're buying utilization management systems, enrollment systems, portals Rarely are they building them. They're licensing that software. Data management, in my mind, is just another version of a technology and capability that, frankly, they can invest in, but why, right? The analytics and the use of that data to solve problems for their customers, I would argue that's where they need to be investing. But investing for technologies that, frankly, should be consistent across the board and can be productized at scale would be a fool's errand. And many customers of ours have come to us after years of trying to build it themselves, and they come to the realization that they don't have the competency to do it, or if they do, it's just costing them way more money than it should and distracting them from the things that actually do truly differentiate them in the marketplace.
And for that reason, you think business should outsource and trust companies like you?
Of course. What option do they have? If they need the capability, they can't
Yep.
do it themselves, or it's going to be too expensive to do it themselves. What choice do they have, right? And that's what we're seeing in the market, where we've now developed a reputation with our early clients of success. It hasn't been perfect, and some of our customers have had to work with us very hard to get to where we are. That's what strategics do along the way, right? But over time, that's really where we've created a unique situation where customers are coming to us as we go. Right?
And let's talk about your businesses and investment. Like, apart from America, you have also invested in Nepal. So I just wanted to know is like, how did the investment journey in Nepal started?
Well, as in anything, it starts with relationships and people, right? We knew early in our Abacus journey, we had partners in third-party organizations already. So we were already working predominantly out of India, some out of Eastern Europe. And during the pandemic, when a lot of the workforce and turnover issues became real, our business suffered significantly. We were, for these larger companies, we were small customers, right, compared to their larger contracts. And so turnover rates of 20, 30, 40%, 50% was really impacting our quality for our customers. So we realized that we needed to benefit from the talent overseas. But if we were going to do it, we wanted to do it where we could have those employees and colleagues be under our corporate umbrella. And so with that as a mindset, the question was, where do we go? India, certainly. I personally have deep relationships given the history of the other businesses that I built. And then one of our colleagues on our team had a very strong relationship in Nepal with the founders of TechCraft. And so it always starts with people and trust, and that's what got us going. And very excited about the progress we've made, given the talent that's available, the energy of that talent, the quality of that talent, and the loyalty of that talent to get us to almost 100 beads, right, sitting in Kathmandu today.
Yep.
And so, but it starts with relationships and trust and people, and that's how we got to Nepal. I'd be lying to you if we said we did a market survey, scanned every country in the world, and did an analysis and said Nepal was the top of the list. This is where good entrepreneurs use a combination of analytics, but also intuition, judgment, and relationship in order to move fast. And that's really how we ended up there.
So Nepal was not on your radar at first.
Correct. It was not on our radar at first, but as in anything else, you pay attention to the market, you pay attention to people. And when you see the opportunity, instead of saying, well, if Nepal, why not, and analyze, candidly, we'd still be analyzing, right? And 2.5 years later, we have a very productive partnership with TechCraft. As I said, almost 100 of our colleagues that are doing some meaningful work across multiple segments of our business, and just really excited about the future. So the bet paid off, right? The bet paid off.
And how fun is it establishing a business in Nepal?
Well, so look, define fun. For me, the fun part is coming to sit and work and engage and sometimes celebrate with people like you and all the other colleagues. And to me, that is real fun. Like, I love coming to Nepal and sitting with our colleagues, and whether it's discussing the strategy of the business, whether it's discussing some of the challenges that we're having in terms of the operation, whether it's going out to lunch and discussing just kind of the future of U.S. healthcare, or just playing music and having some drinks and some good food and dancing, right? To me, all of that is real fun. The hard part is the regulatory environment, the filing of the paperwork, the opening of the bank accounts, and that isn't fun. And our CFO will tell you that it's been a real challenge to do that, just because of the unique nature of the regulatory and paperwork requirements that have to happen. And each geography has these for different reasons, and we understand that. But that part hasn't been fun. But that's part of the job. That's part of getting the establishment done. Because the benefit of what I just mentioned in terms of the true reason why we're there, and the value that's being created far outweighs the drag and hard work that needs to get done to get all the paperwork and filings organized in the way that we need to from a compliance perspective.
Yep. You discussed about the people's perspective, but how about the business perspective about having fun in Nepal?
So overall, look, having fun is a great thing, right? But we wouldn't be there if we weren't having fun from a business perspective, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day, the quality of the talent that we have in Kathmandu and the acceleration that's given us in terms of the delivery of our products to our customers, from a service point of view, has been phenomenal, right?
Yep.
And that's why we're excited to invest and grow. And so if you define fun as business success, no question. As I mentioned earlier, it's a bet we took and the bet's paying off. If it didn't pay off, nothing else would matter, right? At the end of the day, I can come and have a good time. But
Yep.
if the fundamentals of what the objectives we set out for in Nepal weren't being met from a business perspective, from a financial and productivity and a quality perspective, then the rest of it is immaterial. Right. Then it becomes a vacation as opposed to a business trip.
Yeah. And when it comes about investment in foreign countries, especially for the tech sectors, the first name that comes in many mind is either India, Southeast Asia, or as you just said, it's the Eastern Europe. So Nepal, it's not that kind of cup of tea for everyone. So what difference did you find in Nepal among all those countries that I mentioned?
Yeah, well, look, I think, as I said earlier, it's about relationship. And for us, it was a unique situation where one of our executives hailed from one of the companies that has infrastructure in Nepal. As you know, I came from one of those companies as well, given my history. Um,
Yeah.
and so we have a unique situation where the kind of skills that we need were already incubated with these other organizations, right? So if these larger companies that are serving my customers and broader are doing great work in healthcare data and data engineering at scale, um, wow, that's it didn't require me to do a national international analysis to say, well, then if they've got 7, 8, 900 people there that are doing real quality work, and we know they are, then if I need 50, 100, 150, and it's not about poaching from them. That's not the point. The point is that the basic infrastructure from an education perspective, from a throughput perspective, seems to be there for the kinds of skills we're looking for, and it's validated, right? Imitation is the best form of flattery. If I'm the only one in Nepal doing this by myself as a pioneer, I might be nervous, right? But when I see other American firms that are global, one was a publicly traded firm at the time, then since it's gone private, that gives me the confidence that that if I can work with the right partner to help me execute, the talent is there, right? And so that's what gave us the confidence in putting a flag in Nepal. And candidly, it's going to take some time, and I think that given your earlier conversations about where the current administration is, there will be some slowdown and some headwinds and some more scrutiny around, well, what can or can't we do overseas? But again, macro trends are macro trends. The long-term view of the need for the healthcare system is going to be there, and I think Nepal has a very bright future given the talent and the infrastructure that's currently being invested in this IT sector, for sure.
And any surprising thing that you discovered in Nepal's tech talent that you find others people won't believe it?
Well, all the surprises are pleasant and positive. I find the both energy, the enthusiasm, the loyalty to be a very tremendous pleasant surprise. And I don't mean that in other parts of the world people aren't loyal, but maybe that's a function of the market, maybe that's a function of the competitive landscape. but our attrition rates in Nepal are half of what they are in India, right? And we've been very lucky and pleasantly surprised at how even and some of the toughest times where people are working proverbial nights, weekends to try to
Yeah.
get implementations done, services delivered. That the loyalty, the energy. No one. Yes, people complain. That's okay. We're asking people to work very hard, but they're committing to the cause, and they're making it happen. And that energy I feel every time I come in a very, very unique way. And so all of our quote unquote surprises have been very pleasant. And again, still early innings, a couple of years into our journey. And as we now move to formalizing Abacus Nepal and having our colleagues formally be on our corporate infrastructure and start doing less dependency on our partner in TechCraft, who've been wonderful all the way through and continue to be great partners to us. And I vouch for them any day of the week. I think there may be some additional things that we get surprised by, but overall, I think it's been a great experience for sure. The one thing I would say is, again, I grew up in the United States, but ethnically born in India, and so ethnically Indian in many ways. And I've said this to people all the time, that people look at the U.S. as a monolithic country, and we're not. I'm from New Jersey. We have a very different character and persona in New Jersey as someone from Texas, as someone from Florida, as someone from California, as someone from the Midwest and the mountain states. And similarly, there's a difference in culture between India and Nepal, right? And often
Yep.
people ask me, how do you intend to address that culture? Well, the same way that I address the cultural differences between our colleagues in New Jersey and Boston and Texas, in that you recognize the differences, you celebrate the differences, and you respect the areas that you need to if those differences cause friction, right? You don't harp on it, but fundamentally, I've been actually very lucky in that cultural divide between India and Nepal hasn't manifested in a business sense as much as we were worried it might. But again, as an organization that's been fairly global since its inception, and the mindset that we've had in terms of celebrating the differences in each other as opposed to harping on them, I think has created that ability for us to work together seamlessly across geographies. Now, as we scale, will that become a challenge? I don't know. I'm hoping not. But so far, it's been a wonderful experience, and I think part of that's also investing in beads going from India to Nepal, from Nepal to India, from India and Nepal to the United States, and as we can do more of that, obviously that fosters even a stronger foundation as well.
Yep. So from offshore to onshore. So when would be that possible then?
The biggest limitation there, I would say, is two things, right?
Yep.
One is we just don't have an onshore physical location, right? We do. We have an office in Boston, but on any given day of the week, there's probably 5 people there. And so even if I brought you on shore, where am I going to send you where you get the benefit of not doing a remote session, right? I've been in situations at least once or twice in my time at Abacus where I've taken the plane to Boston and I've sat completely by myself in the office and taken all of my calls back then on Zoom and now on Teams, and then gotten on a train and come home. And so when someone says, "How was your visit to Boston?" I could have stayed in my living room. It would have been no different, right? So that's one structural issue for sure, that unless there's a client site or specific reason. The second structural issue is just, again, the immigration aspect of it, right? For anyone to come to the United States requires a visa process that unfortunately has just gotten harder, if not completely stopped, at least for the foreseeable future, back to your comment on the current administration's view. And so that creates just another barrier that
Yeah.
that we would have to come across, right? I think it's both. It's the ability to find meaningful reasons to come. The immigration element of it is another annoying factor.
From your perspective, outsourcing in Nepal. So what do you find Nepal? Is it a kind of a sleeping giant or just a small steady player?
So in the definition of giant is again, you're in the context. Nepal's in between two very
Yeah.
large countries with nearly half the population of the world, right?
Yeah.
So how do you find giant? I don't know if Nepal, from a numbers and scale perspective, will ever be considered a giant. The flip side of it is, I think the closeness of your population, certainly in the valley in Kathmandu, and the ability to move and really energize that talent create some unique opportunities. So there may be some very specific niche areas, and I think healthcare and data and engineering, you put those things together, and then let's move forward to the wonderful world of artificial intelligence, right? There's some unique opportunities to make outsized differences regardless of how big or small your country is, right? And so I think that, again, with the right policy frameworks from your government, the right educational infrastructure and promotion, you've got what it takes to get to be a meaningful player, and as part of a global landscape, without really defining kind of, comparatively, what are you going to be compared to some of the much larger countries in the world, right? So
So, at least in healthcare, data, and engineering, you believe that there is some chance for this country not to be a giant, but at least a nice player, I would say.
well, so let's flip it the other way around, right? I would
Yeah.
say, in the context of your economy, right? Not so much in
Yeah.
the context of the world's economy, but in the context of your
Yeah.
economy, absolutely. I think this could be a phenomenal opportunity from a growth perspective for Nepal, in a way that provides meaningful opportunity for talent
Yep.
and business, and therefore the knock-on effects in respect to your tax contributions to your government, the ability to then invest in additional infrastructure to continue, not just companies like ours that are going to invest, but just the overall kind of the multiplier effect of those dollars, if you will, rupees, if you will, that will continue to invest and grow, right? So to me, this industry can become a giant amongst the industries that Nepal has, right? Agriculture, tourism. There's no reason why the
Yeah.
tech sector can't take an outsized role for the Nepalese economy, right? Again, on a GDP basis, you won't compare, but that's not the. I don't think that's the right benchmark. The benchmark is on a per capita basis. How much
Yeah.
value and revenue are you bringing in for this kind of work from an export standpoint? And you are just at the beginning. We're just at the beginning of that. And I think the future is really bright. Again, assuming the right policies, the right educational incentives, and everything else are put into place.
And in your opinion, what other companies do you think should come in Nepal and invest here?
What other companies? Well, look, from a
Yep.
selfish point of view, right? Um, Hopefully they take their time, because I want the opportunity to get the best talent and not have to compete, right?
Yep.
That's just a very myopic Abacus CEO founder perspective. From a policy perspective, and as a global citizen, and for the benefit of Nepal, listen, any company that is dealing in data, that, healthcare or not, I think data is a competency. I think you've shown data engineering, and even the technologies that support that, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of SQL. And then again, I know there's a lot of excitement about AI and Gen AI, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a sector or a type of company, but those are the kinds of characteristics and qualities that I see as real opportunity for the global economy to benefit from. And so any company that needs any of those things, which I would argue at this point, every single company does, right? If you're not thinking about generative AI in the context of your business, and
Yeah.
underpinning generative AI is always going to be data, right? And so
Sure.
if you apply that lens to it, then there isn't a company in the world that is honest about what it's doing that couldn't benefit from the talent that's available in Nepal. Now, what scale do you have to be? How to efficiently access it? We had a unique circumstance in terms of relationship, and all those things have to come into play. But I'm actually very excited about our partnership with TechCraft, partly because, short term, I think there are going to be headwinds given some of the political realities that are happening out of the United States and the world. But as I said, long term, there's a tremendous opportunity to be played here.
So, do you have any ambition or dream you have for Abacus Insights here in Nepal?
Well, I think the dream is already a reality, right? We already formed
Okay.
our entity as a wholly owned subsidiary of Abacus Insights United States. We are in the process of migrating all of our beads from TechCraft to Abacus Insights. And the goal then will be to continue to grow. We're having active conversations with the leadership at TechCraft about, what's our relationship with TechCraft as we move forward, and how heavy or thin does that become as we build our own capabilities in HR and administration, and even over time real estate, et cetera. So there's some work to be done there in terms of kind of what that looks like. In the long term, let's continue that model, right? And can TechCraft and Abacus Insights together create an engine where other companies can come and do what we have done, whether it's partially or wholly in terms of fully outsourced or in this model that we've created. And so our view is it's less about Abacus Insights. It's more about, our relationship with TechCraft and the talent in Nepal. How do we help grow that into a footprint that, again, meets the opportunity that we know can be done?
Like what I was trying to state is multinational companies that invest here in Nepal or any other countries there. So in a long term goal, so what I have seen them doing is like partnering up with universities, involving in other some socio-cultural related activities. So they are actively involved in this stuff.
I see. I
So
see. I see what you're saying.
is Abacus
Yeah,
thinking of involving in it?
absolutely. Well, look, any talent acquisition strategy needs to involve your local educational apparatus, right? And that's a
Yep.
conversation we have with TechCraft. We've done boot camps in the past to get talent in, using both India and US and even local resources for training. All that has to be done. To me, that's tactical. It's not strategic. That's just by definition. When you work in any environment, I mean, even in Boston, we have relationships with universities that are giving us, internship talent and additional things, right? As far as philanthropy is concerned, absolutely. I mean, we're not at a scale yet where we can afford to do that. But it's interesting. My wife just mentioned to me a organization that's in Nepal that some of her friends every year they go and they do mammogram screenings and a lot of women's health initiatives. And she said to me, "Would Abacus Nepal or Abacus Insights ever sponsor some of those things?" I'm like, "Absolutely." I said, "We're not yet at a place financially where we can afford to do that, but that's something that as we continue to grow, and part of our mission is to work with local communities and add that." And I think it does two things. One, it establishes our presence in the country and shows that we're committed, not just from a business perspective, but from an overall wellness perspective. And as a healthcare company, I'm a physician, as you know, right? Those are
Yep.
really important things. But secondly, selfishly, from a talent perspective, it's always good, right, for local talent to get involved in the community in a mission-oriented way, broader than just, hey, this is what I'm doing to make Abacus Insights successful. So I think in the long term, no question, those are parts of things that we have to do. More as a citizen of Nepal, right? A corporate
Yep.
citizen of Nepal, in many ways.
So let's get now towards a little bit about your personal experience related to business. So since you are the co-founder of the Abacus Insights company, and what measures do you take to make sure that your investors are happy from your company and they do not uh, make problems to you?
Yeah, look, any founder CEO will tell you, as soon as you take outside capital from anybody, whether it's a friend, family member, in our case, a combination. We've got friends and family members that are investors, and then we have venture capital funds that are investors. We have large companies that are investors. You have an obligation, right? People say you're the
Yep.
CEO. You don't have a boss. Well, I do. I have a board of directors. I'm on the board, but I have a board of directors that I report to and I'm accountable to. I
Yep.
have investors that I'm accountable to, and so the metrics they care about is growth, right? Are you
Yeah.
creating value? Initially, are you solving the problem for a customer that's meaningful enough for the customer to pay you enough money that you can do that work and have a nice margin left over, right? And then that customer can ask more customers to come on board, and now you have a growing business. So growth is a really, really important metric for us, right? Gross margin is a really important metric. So how much money are you retaining in the business by delivering the product and or service that you're offering in the marketplace? And that's a metric that we are now working very hard on, given that we've shown that we can grow the business. We've added lots of customers and so far so good. And ultimately, what's left at the end, right? What's left at the end from a profitability standpoint that justifies why ultimately a for-profit business exists, right? And I will tell you that I'm a very passionate person, that I don't build businesses. I want to solve problems. And if you
Yeah.
solve a meaningful enough problem for a customer and can do it efficiently, then you can build a business, right? And so when you look at it from that standpoint, I think we're really strongly on our way of success. And partly the evidence is that a lot of our customers are actually investors in our company, right? So they believe not just from the value of the product, but they believe in the value of the business and what we're trying to get done here, right? But that's what the investors care about. And candidly, from their perspective, whether we get that done from India, from Nepal, from Boston, from New York, it's interesting to them because, again, they have other companies that they want to see what the formula for success is. But the good news is, if you deliver on those results, then they let me, as the CEO and the team, make the decisions about how much we want to do in Nepal, how much we want to do in India, how much we want to do anywhere else in the world, right? And so if you're not meeting your results, and listen, Abacus has not been a straight line success story. We've had our ups and downs where the board and the investors have gotten involved and said to me, look, we need and we expect this X, Y, and Z from you. And look, that's their job. And I respect their holding me accountable to that. But in the overall scheme of things, we've come a long way, and we're showing great momentum. And now, in particular, as we're growing, I think the investors remain very, very excited about continuing to support us to get to whatever the next outcome needs to be.
And while you are finding an investor for your company, so what things did you do in order to make them happy and invest in your company?
Well, let me turn it the other way around. First of all, it was important to me that I found the right investors, right? Just because you have money to invest doesn't make you the right investor, right? You have to
Yep.
have an investor that understands what you're trying to do, understands how hard it is willing to help you in ways that you are going to need that help, and also understands how long it takes, right? And so, there are hundreds of investors, thousands of investors out there, right? And hundreds of venture capitalist investors that are out there. But making sure you pick the right ones, that's actually equal, if not more important, than making sure that you please them in getting the pitch done, right? And we were very lucky in that through my own personal network, that the early investors that we chose and ultimately chose us in 406 and in Echo, both met all those criteria. They understood the magnitude of the problem. Echo is actually a customer. They're owned by Cambia in North Carolina, both who are customers,
Yep.
right? And then since they've added 2 more Blue Cross plans, but they understood how big this problem was. They understood the patience it would take to build a business. They trusted me as an entrepreneur to do it. That then allowed them to say, okay, yes, this is a greenfield. They didn't invest in anything but me, and to some extent, Gokul. Gokul was not quite formally involved early on. He kind of came on board as time went on, but ultimately, it's a PowerPoint deck. That they said, yes, this is meaningful enough, and we're going to come and invest behind you, right? And so what you had to show them was, one, a reputation of success as a business person. And I've done 2 other companies in my past to show that I know how to build at least services companies. These were not a technology company, so a little bit different there. 2, I know the problem, and I came from the industry and tried to solve the problem as a customer, so I knew that. And 3, just the ability to get things done, right? To say, okay, he's trustworthy, and we can put the money behind him in order to get us. So the early piece of it was really that at that level. Do I believe in the person, and from an ethics and credibility perspective, right? do they have the right credentials, right? Are they committed? And ultimately, we'll give them the capital. If you give those four C's together, those are the ingredients that are needed in order to build, in order to solve that problem that allows you then to build a business.
Like now you can say this because you have a good track record and people trust you. They know that you have built businesses and you can run a proper business. But for a newcomer
Hmm?
who does not have a good network and who just wants to start a business, like for them, this might not be the journey there.
Fair. But remember, 13, 14 years ago, I was there. I,
Yeah.
I had to start my first business in order to say I've got a track record, right?
Yeah.
But it also comes back down to the same things. When you say credibility, first thing is more about your ethics, right? Your character more than anything else, right?
Yeah.
Can they trust you? Are you going to say what you do? Are you going to do what you say? You're going to be honest about all the things that are going to go wrong, all right? Or just come and say everything's perfect, and hide everything wrong, right? So character matters, and that comes true whether you are a big company, small company. That's an important part of it, right? Secondly, the credentials that you need to run a business, right? From the standpoint of my first company was a medical management company based out of India, right? Now I'm a physician and I've run
Yeah.
a medical management organization within a large company. So it was clear to my investors that while I'd never started a company before and I had the character, at least they thought, I understood the business, right? I've been there, I've done it. This isn't an idea that I'm imagining. I've run this operation before, right? And so when you put those two things together, and then you convince them there's an opportunity out there in the marketplace, that's what you need to do in a very, very cogent way, right? And so even as a first-time entrepreneur, you show those elements and the passion and the commitment that you're going to see it through. People will invest in you, right?
And how does it feel being a CEO?
Um, it is the best job I've ever had and the hardest job I've ever had, right?
Okay.
The hardest part of it is often you're alone.
Yep.
I'm blessed in that I've got a great co-founder who, while he's my CRO and has had other roles, he's also my co-founder. And there are times where he and I will talk, not as Minal CEO and he's the CRO, but as partners and as co-founders. And sometimes he'll say, "Hey, I'm bringing this to you as a co-founder," or I'll say, "I'm talking to you as a co-founder." So it's been helpful to have somebody to understand at that level. But even then, right, at the end of the day, the fundamental issues really rest in my hands, right? I have a board where I can pick up the phone and call any one of them, but they're all individuals with their own perspectives, sometimes their own biases and their own incentives, right? As shareholders, for the most part, just the reality of it, right? So it is a hard job in that regard, but it's the best job too because frankly, my philosophy in leadership is that I don't do any work, right? If you look at the Slack channel and say it says, "What do I do?" I talk all day, right? My mother will even say during the pandemic when I was working from home, she's like, "You are talking, talking, talking. Do you do anything?" No, I don't, right? And why is that? Well, it's because my job is to work with our team and the board to set what our overall mission and vision of the company is long term, which we
Yep.
did when we founded it and continue to revisit it. Set the strategy in the intermediate term, 1 to 2 to 3 years, right? Put the goals together for an annual process and say, okay, here's what we're going to achieve next year. Figure out what resources my team needs with their input, right? Balance the priorities to come up with the business plan and then a budget, and then tell each person to go. And as soon as that is done, my job then stops from being a leader to being an order taker, right? My one-on-ones with Gokul, our CRO, is he tells me what to do. Manal, I need you to go talk to this client. I need you to talk to this person here. We're stuck over here. Can you help me think this through? With Frank, from the financing standpoint, right? this is where I need your help. I'm doing this meeting with this banker. I need you to show up. Great, right? So it's the servant leadership. Right? I'm doing things that I'm being told to do that are meeting the objective of that individual, because that individual needs to deliver for the whole organization. And if we all behave that way and think that way, whether you're running a team of 5 or in my case running a team of 250, right? You push the decisions where they are best solved, right? The problems are solved best closest to where the problem is, and whether that's nearest to the customer or nearest to the product and technology, get management out of the way. Let us empower you to do your job. Ultimately, that's the CEO's job, right? And so if you look at my day, I actually have time. I have time to think. I have time to have conversations like this. I have time to be out on a podium, having lunch with a customer, sometimes just planning, because we've got now, after 7+ years, the right team in place that are working really, really hard. And then each one of them, as they get their organizations mature, will have more and more time. That's how we scale the organization, right? So in that regard, it's the best job in the world as well, right? So you take the good with the bad all the way through.
Like, you start a business, you gain some profit there. So when does a founder thinks that it's the right time to make an exit from company? Because one day a founder needs to be exited from the company. So how do you identify those things?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. First of all, any founder or CEO that says, I have a 5-year plan, I'm going to sell the company in 5 years, blah, 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 impossible. There's so many unknowns and so many unpredictable things that will happen, that you just have to keep a North Star. What is your long-term objective, right? If the objective is to build a business and get to a number and sell it, I'm not sure you're going to be successful, right? If the objective is, again, solving a meaningful problem and getting so good at solving that problem that you get to go do more and more and solve it more and more and more again, now you've got a business that can grow for the long term. And obviously, watching the competitive nature of what's happening, watching the market, technology, and all the different evolutions that happen along the way, right? So people say to me, well, how big is Abacus going to get before you sell it? I don't know, right? To this day, I know there's specific milestones I need to achieve from a financial point of view so we can continue to invest in the business. I know that there are times where a third party may come and say, hey, we're really interested in you, and maybe we will want to acquire the company. My first company, that's how it was acquired. I wasn't looking to sell it. It was at the end of a sales meeting where the chief operating officer said, well, how much? I said, well, here's the proposal. He says, not for the proposal for the services, for the whole company. And I said, well, we're not for sale. And 9 months later, we sold, right? And so these are all extremely fluid discussions that you need to have with your investors and your board, with your team, with your customers, to make sure everyone's aligned. The other thing I'll share with you is, it's also, exit doesn't mean exit financially from a selling the company point of view. Exit can mean I'm no longer the right CEO, right? And I've already told my board of directors that there was going to come a time where either I feel like I'm not having fun anymore, right? This job is too hard for me, or I'm not energized by what's happening and what's going on. Or you're going to feel that, the company, Minal's not the right CEO to take us from, he took us from point 0 to point A, from point A to point B. And let's just be open about that, because I'm a very large shareholder in the company. So if you believe it's the right thing for the shareholders in totality, I'm probably one of the ones that are going to benefit from that decision more than anybody else. And I don't have the ego to say I need to be the CEO of this thing until we sell the damn thing, right? And so there's maybe an exit for me personally where I get to join the board, I get to do something else, or maybe I take a different role within the company, which is sometimes unnatural, but totally open to that as well, so that the company can find the right executive to go from, the double-digit revenue millions, to the triple-digit to a billion, whatever the case may be. Right. I'm a creator. I come up with ideas and I see it through to a certain level of scale. I'm not an operator. Very naturally not. That's why we promoted a chief operating officer. I'm not the guy that looks in the details of SLAs and operating metrics. That drains me. Right. I'm the strategy guy. I'm the one who wants to look outside. I want to make that deal. Right? I want to go solve that problem. Right. So at a certain point, you don't need a CEO like that, right? You need a CEO that's going to run the business. That's just the natural. That's a natural exit point whenever the board or I personally decide it's time.
If you start listening to others like your investors and all those people, wouldn't it be like Apple throwing Steve Jobs from his own company?
Well, you never know, right? I mean, there are lots.
Yeah.
People always think about the big companies like Apple and Microsoft and the histories behind that of these incredible founders. Look at Elon Musk, right? An incredible character in so many ways, controversial more so now than ever before, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure those are the examples to look at because those are aberrations. Most businesses are not those. Most businesses, will get to 50, 100, 200, 300 million if they're lucky. And there are lots of dynamics that go in their way. And this is really where the expertise of my investors is valuable because they've seen this movie play out, both in terms of catastrophic failures as well as successes. Very few get to be in NVIDIA or Facebook or Amazon. And yes, there are lessons to be learned there because everyone aspires to be that. But the reality is, most businesses no one's ever heard of. Most great businesses no one's ever heard of, right? And
Yeah.
in there's an incredible amount of learning of what did it take to make that company successful, and that leadership team or CEO or founder or board of directors, because that's reality. That's more of what you need to understand as what really happens in business versus these breakaways. That again, lots to be learned from that, but may not be the blueprint that you want to follow. Right?
And establishing a business today, what differences do you find in your early days while you opened your first business and this 2025 year?
Yeah, I mean, so I can't talk about 25. I can talk about 2017 when I started, right? I'd say to
Yeah.
you, it was in some respects easier the third time around, largely because you knew what you knew.
Yeah.
But there's also things you didn't know, right? This is the first time I've ever raised venture capital. My first and second businesses were all internally financed, friends, family. Not because didn't want to raise money, but 2007 and 8 were very difficult times to raise money.
Yeah.
And then second business, I self-financed. I had enough capital from my first exit that I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to take any investors. And I sold it before I needed to take any investors, right? Um, this one's the first time I've had venture capital, sophisticated money and a board of directors that really were driving the success of the business. And so that was a great thing in that I had partners, right? I really felt like I had people that understood what I needed. And that I was accountable to, and it was a good thing for me as opposed to, oh man, I don't want people telling me what to do. Like I'm not wired that way, right? I'm also mature to say if you're telling me to do something and I don't want to do it, I'm going to tell you I disagree with you, right? It's just that's natural and hopefully I'm healthy. So it was easier in that I was older, a little bit more mature in decision making and kind of problem solving, and I also knew very early on that this is not a straight line, and told everybody
Yeah.
that look, this business plan, the moment I made it, it's obsolete, and why I'm going to stand behind, I'm going to tell you it's going to change, right? And let's be open about that, and let's as long as you're willing to bob and weave, right? And 7+ years later, here we are, right? I don't know if it's any different today. If you're going to start a company, I don't think it's any different. I would say the one thing is technologies are shifting faster than they've ever had, but they were in 2017, faster than 2010, right? So that velocity has existed since the dawn of time, right? So I don't know if there's any difference in today's environment versus 7 years ago versus 20 years ago. The thing that's changed is just my experience and maturity, right? And also ability to take risk. I think the first time I started left a big job, and my son was 6 months old, and off we went. The third time I did it, okay, if this company were a failure, my lifestyle wouldn't change. I'm not a lavish guy, right? If it were a real success, my lifestyle wouldn't change because I'm not a lavish guy, right? So in that regard, it gave me the ability to take more bold decisions, and because the downside, my kids' college tuitions were paid, the house is there, I've got all the luxuries that I want. So to me, this is all about the upside, and let's go, right? So different mentality in that regard.
Yep, you talked about your lifestyle, but business is all about profit.
Okay.
So you could have thought about the profit that is generated.
You mean, but that's again, the wrong outcome. I- you, your business is about profit, but you don't get, but that is the outcome, right?
Yeah.
It only comes if you are able to solve a meaningful problem for a customer, get paid for it, and do it in a way that leaves something behind. It's a
Yep.
really important distinction to make, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're not solving a meaningful problem for a customer who's willing to pay you for it, you don't have anything.
Yep. And so I guess it's we are at the very end of the conversation. So yep, and I would go towards a little bit about your leadership. So any changes in leadership style that you have found in recent years?
For me, personally,
Yep,
yeah, I mean, look,
personally.
as you grow and mature, or you think you mature, there are aspects of you that definitely change, right? Am I fundamentally a different leader than I was when I first started as an entrepreneur? Um, I think so. I think in that first company, I was a subject matter expert, right? It was a care
Yep.
management company that were building out of India. And I knew how to run a care management organization. I knew the skill sets that I needed, the kinds of physicians and clinicians I needed. And so it was okay. I had a lot of knowledge to bring to the table, right? Abacus is very different. Tech, data, engineering. I'm a doctor,
Yep.
right? So to me, when I say to people that I'm the least qualified to make a decision around this table when it comes to product and tech, which are a lot of the decisions that we have to make, I'm not lying. I'm not being a quote unquote humble CEO. I'm telling the truth, right? I didn't know what Kubernetes was. I couldn't tell you the difference between AWS and Azure and GCP, 7 years ago. I'm not sure I could tell you now, right? And so the ability to really find the right talent, trust that talent, empower that talent, hold that talent accountable. That's the superpower that I think I've built over the last 20 years. It's different than 20 years ago, right? Now, that is a blessing when you find the right people. And right now, I've got a great team and we've got the right, but it wasn't that way all the way through. We went through our twists and turns, and sometimes you have the right people for now, and then as the business grows, things change, and you have to be honest enough, astute enough to know if and when that happens, and then course correct quickly, right? So those are the kinds of things that I think are different now than they were 20 years ago. But it's all an evolution, and just like in every human, you put me under pressure, I behave differently than if you have a conversation like this with me, right? And so sometimes the emotion comes out, and I'm not proud of it. And there are colleagues that if you talk to, they say, "Oh, Manal really got angry and yelled at me." I don't like that. That's not my DNA, but sometimes that happens. I'm human, right? And so those are all learnings that I have to still polish, and sometimes not polish, sometimes completely excise, as I continue to grow. But that's just the journey that we're all on together, right? So
Yep. So I guess this is the end of our show. So considering your time, thank you so much, Minal, for a wonderful time. It was great talking with you. Mm, Once again, happy birthday.
thank you for the honor, Kritik, and I appreciate the thoughtful questions. And this is, like I said, for Nepal, just the beginning. I think the best years are still ahead, and for Abacus, the best years are still ahead.